hands. Mansueto Ventures is the company that owned Inc. and Fast Company. So I was the editor of Inc., and I was the CEO of Inc. and its sister publication, Fast Company. But the most important thing you need to know about me is how seriously I take the burden of responsibility for being the last thing standing between you and whiskey tasting. So bear with me. The woman approached me just as I was leaving the stage. I was speaking before an audience of entrepreneurs from my hometown, Cincinnati, Ohio, and I thought the speech had gone great. You know how it is sometimes when the words just come to you? Well, this was one of those times. People chuckled at my jokes, and I was even able to reach way back into the recesses of my memory and pull out an apt quote from a 20th century philosopher that I had studied in college, Hannah Arendt, who had a lot to say about media and propaganda. So I was not feeling just witty and authoritative, I was feeling learned. So the woman from Cincinnati says, "Can I ask you a question?" And I was all prepared for, how do you know so much about Hannah Arendt? And instead, she asked, politely, more out of curiosity, I'd say, than anger, "Why do you journalists always lie?" I got defensive. I told her that that was ridiculous, and of course, that did no good at all. She insisted, in her sweet Ohio niceness, that she was onto me, that she knew, and all her friends knew, that everyone in my profession was a pathological liar and out to destroy everything that had made America great. But have a nice day. 40% of American voters and 70% of Republicans believe that the 2020 presidential election was a fraud. 67% of people around the world believe that journalists intentionally deceive their readers. And 66% of people believe the same of their leaders. As a culture, we have abandoned the institutions that were the guardians of truth, and we have lost the ability to distinguish between fact and fantasy. Our information environment is fast approaching the tipping point that every authoritarian propagandist longs to achieve, the point at which the masses believe that everything is possible and nothing is true. And yes, that is a quote from Hannah Arendt. It didn't take me long to work her into this speech, did it? To restore the primacy of truth is a very, very big job. It's going to take decades, and the work of a lot of dedicated people, some of whom actually happen to be here at the Dublin Tech Summit. Joan Donovan of the Schurenberg Center at Harvard, Anya Kerr and Mike Little of Kinsen, right here in Dublin, Lyric Jane of Logically in the UK. But population level change, like we're talking about here, is an all hands on deck kind of affair. So even if you're not, exposing falsehoods like Kinsen or Logically or Shorenstein, or writing legislation for Congress or Parliament or the Doyle, you still need to be part of the fight. Truth needs allies. And that's where you and I come in. What does it mean to be an ally of truth? Well, it starts with acknowledging that there is a difference between unreality and reality, and that living in the republic of reality is way better than living in the other place. Now, you would think that no one would have a problem with that, and yet, how many times have you heard someone say that science or the media got this fact or that fact wrong, and therefore you can't believe anything they say, and who knows what to believe. And how often does a particular billionaire opine that free speech demands that Twitter open its platform to every statement, no matter how far-fetched or destructive, as if every claim was valid if you could just imagine it? You would think that the guy who invented SpaceX and Tesla could do better than that. Being an ally of truth means that you're willing to defend the proposition that some things are facts and some things are not. Period. When people claim, as some do in the US, that everyone is entitled to their own version of truth, what you can do is point out that we actually do have ways to determine which version of truth is reliable and which isn't, and it has nothing to do with how many retweets it gets. In the Republic of Reality, we have agreed to be governed by two fundamental rules of factuality. In science, these are the same rules that underlie the scientific method. In law, the rules of evidence. And in my profession, the standards of editorial excellence. So factuality principle number one. A fact is a claim that can, in principle, be disproven, but has so far withstood every attempt to do so. Dublin is the most fun city in the EU. That's not a fact, however much you may agree with it, because fun is a subjective experience and you can't disprove it or prove it. So how about this? Vaccines lower the risk of death from COVID. Now, that could be disproven. All you would have to do is assemble a large enough population sample, control the variables, and see if the unvaccinated have a different death rate from the vaccinated. Well, this has been done many times. And as you can see from the graph, the results don't disprove the claim, they support it. Now, all of us know many people who sincerely believe, for whatever reason, that vaccines don't work. But in the Republic of Reality, sincerity is beside the point. As the astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson puts it, the great thing about science is that it's true, even if you don't believe it. But if you don't believe it, that's okay. In the Republic of Reality, you are invited to try to disprove claims. The reason principle number one is based on disproof rather than proof is that no fact is graven in stone forever. A fact gets stronger the more people try to disprove it and the fact resists it. And the whole Republic of Reality in general gets stronger the more that old facts are overturned and replaced by stronger facts. For centuries, it was a fact that the Earth was flat, but who could disprove it? It matched observations, sailors could navigate, caravans could travel on the assumption that the Earth was flat. And yet, when that fact was overturned, all sorts of new powers were unleashed, like circumnavigation. And aren't we better off? So, if you're one of those people who believes that the US election was fraudulent, what I would say is, have at it. File another lawsuit if you can find a judge that will accept it. Hold another audit if you can find a jurisdiction that will fund it. I would only advise that you go in with some expectation, some reason to believe that the results will be different from the scores of other lawsuits and audits that have already been done and supported the election. So factuality principle number one was a fact is a claim that can be disproven but hasn't been. Principle number two is that the veracity of a claim is independent of who promotes it. In the Republic of Reality, there is no Pope. There is no Putin. And you cannot cure cancer by manipulating the energy field around your body just because Gwyneth Paltrow says you can. Yeah, it's really tempting to want to outsource truth to one person or one authority. It would make life a lot easier if you could do that, but history shows that's a really bad idea. No one is free of mental biases or perverse incentives or incomplete knowledge or the temptations of power. And when you try to align everyone behind a single-sourced truth, you can only do it by force. And when you do that, you get the 30 Years' War, the invasion of Ukraine, and the storming of the US Capitol. Truth, by contrast, thrives on a diversity of different players, each of whom has an equal choice of disproving a claim. Truth is a collaboration. Being an ally of truth also means not being a useful idiot. Joan Donovan, the head of research at Harvard Shorenstein Center, has put together what she calls the media manipulation life cycle. In stage 1, a disinformation campaign is planned. In stage 2, the disinformation is seeded into a remote part of the internet, like 4chan or Gab, or a small social media account where it is amplified by human supporters or bots, or a combination of the two. And in stage 3, if the campaign is lucky, it gets picked up by someone with more followers than common sense or more followers than conscience, and it goes viral. Russian intelligence operatives, who are the virtuosos of the disinformation game, call such a person a useful idiot. So let's take, for example, the odd rumor that circulated in the US a couple of months ago that stipulated that there was a trend of suspicious fires at food processing plants. The rumor arose as food prices started to rise because of inflation, and on social media there appeared a meme. And the meme collated 20 local news headlines, each a story about a fire at a local food processing plant, the implication being that arsonists were trying to disrupt the US food supply. Now, in this campaign, who was the useful idiot? Well, it turns out it was none other than Tucker Carlson, the most popular TV columnist in the US, who elevated the rumor on his Fox News program. Never mind that there are 300,000 food processing plants in the US, so fires at 20 of them over a period of 6 months is nothing unusual. And never mind that none of these fires was deemed suspicious by the authorities, and never mind that very few of the fires were large enough to delay food processing by even a day. Now, why would Carlson elevate a story like that was so easily disproven? I don't know. But one could speculate that in his mind, the vision of a team of saboteurs trying to cripple the strategic stockpile of Cheetos and Cap'n Crunch cereal was just too good a story to pass up. Carlson is an easy target, but the truth is, any one of us could be a useful idiot under the right circumstances. I was. In the information vacuum after the Boston Marathon bombing, I retweeted a post that allegedly was about a charity that was helping the victims of the bombing. That was a scam, and I was a useful idiot. To a disinformation hacker, social media is just another software network, and your brain is just another node on that network. And like any node, it has vulnerabilities and can be hacked. And your job as an ally of truth is to recognize your vulnerabilities and defend against them. So, how do you do that? Well, start by checking your emotions. Does a story or a post that was shared with you outrage you, surprise you, shock you, disgust you? Not everyone who shares emotional content is lying to you, but everyone who is lying is very likely to be trying to exploit that vulnerability because it causes you to suspend rational skepticism. Similarly, you should be willing to let go of your favorite narratives. All of us make sense of the events in our lives by arranging them into stories. Same is true of the news we consume. You take a news story, you massage it, you shave off the parts that don't make sense to you, and you mold it into a narrative that you recognize and love. So when you encounter a post or a story that fires your emotions or conforms to your favorite narrative or confirms something you just always knew to be true, be careful. Apply the rules of factuality and ask yourself, what would it take to disprove this? The day after the storming of the US Capitol, one of my writers at Inc. submitted an essay in which he made the claim that the Capitol Police stood aside and let the rioters into the building. Now, why would a veteran journalist, professional journalist, make such a claim? He was emotional, like all of us were after January 6th, and he probably was predisposed to accept a story in which the police misbehaved. But my editors, as gatekeepers in a reality-based profession, had to ask themselves, what would it take to disprove this? Well, how about all the video of the police resisting the rioters or firing tear gas at them or being injured standing up to them? So the story ran the next day without the false claim about the police. Finally, to avoid being a useful idiot, maybe the best thing of all is to strive to be known for your wisdom, not for your loyalty. Loyalty is a powerful force. For all of us, it's always going to be easier to agree with a statement that we know our friends will approve of. Research shows that people will agree with a statement that they know to be false just to avoid contradicting their tribe. But being an ally of truth demands more of you than that. Dr. Lena Wen, a public health specialist that you may have seen from her appearances on CNN, long supported science-based precautions against COVID, like masking and vaccines. And then a year ago, she suggested in a Washington Post column that vaccinated families could consider going back to public gatherings that she never would have suggested they attend before there were vaccines. In an instant, she went from being demonized by the anti-vax crowd to being burned on social media by the public safety advocates that she had once considered her friends. Was she wrong to change her mind? Of course not. The vaccine altered the risk-reward calculus. And in the Republic of Reality, changing your mind is not a sign of weakness or dishonesty. It's a sign of your commitment to truth. The economist John Maynard Keynes is supposed to have said that when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir? Finally, being an ally of truth means that you never stop fighting. In 1964, 42% of American adults smoked cigarettes. Tobacco was a leading advertiser on most media platforms, and Big Tobacco and its lobbyists were huge in state houses and in Congress. And it seemed like changing American smoking habits was an impossible uphill battle. And yet last year, less than 14% of American adults smoked. Between then and now, There were regulations and litigation and whistleblowers and lots of science. But what really made the difference was that people, at population scale, altered their behavior. Change happens. And yes, social media and outrage headlines and tribal loyalties are all very addictive. But so are cigarettes. Hannah Arendt, one more time. No matter how large the tissue of falsehood that an experienced liar has to offer, it will never be large enough to cover the immensity of factuality. So let's go back to the lady from Cincinnati. As an ally of truth, what do I wish I had done? I was wrong to try to make her wrong, because that only made her dig in. What I wish I had done was to ask her why she felt the way she felt, and then to listen seriously to what she told me. I could have tried to find common ground from my own experience, including how hard we work at Inc. and Fast Company to get things right. And I could have asked her the question that every ally of truth is supposed to ask themselves. Like, what evidence would it take to get you to change your mind? And what would it take to disprove this in your eyes? But what I would never do is to let her false claim stand. By failing to speak up, I'd only be helping to deepen the despair that many of us feel now, that lies being spread by powerful people, abetted by social media, cannot be stopped. Everything is possible and nothing is true. But we're not there yet. Truth has one insurmountable advantage. It works. Yeah, outrage headlines may make you furious. They may flatter your confirmation bias. They may make you feel like a solid member of your tribe. And yet, lies create nothing except chaos. Falsehood cannot discover a vaccine, or put a rover on Mars, or build the trust with each other that we need to govern ourselves. No matter how large the tissue of falsehood that a liar has to offer, it will never be large enough to cover the immensity of factuality. So let me ask you a question. Are you willing, as an ally of truth, to occasionally have an uncomfortable confrontation to stand up to a falsehood? Are you willing to challenge your own beliefs and let go of your most treasured narratives? Well, you should be. There are virtual realities, there are alternate realities, there are augmented realities. But when it comes to what it takes to bring us together, to solve the problems that we face as a species, there is no substitute for the real thing. Thank you.